Welcome everyone to our virtual panel, Setting Healthy Screen Time Limits for Kids Over the Holiday Break. We're here today to talk about a topic that comes up every year with parents, which is how to manage excessive tech usage and screen time in your family during school breaks, especially the winter holidays. This is not only limited to winter holidays, it could be any school break and even on weekends, but we do see that the research shows that during school breaks and winter holidays, screen time increases, physical activity decreases, and often family conflict increases, especially if you live somewhere where it's too cold or dark to go outside. I grew up in Chicago, and this was always a problem in the winter. So none of this is a surprise to most of us, I'm going to guess. But what many parents may not know is that all of this, in turn, can lead to time spent on screens displacing important activities like sleeping, eating, and socialization, as well as negative psychological stimulation from excessive use of devices. This could be either things that you see on social media that are very triggering to you, or that lead to unhealthy psychological stimulation over a certain amount of time. It could be excessive gaming, which often is called problematic gaming, which, it's very easy for many of us to slip into, even if most of the other times of the year we do have good gaming habits. Or it could be things like just not spending enough time in balanced activities throughout our day. Another thing that we see is that excessive tech usage does impact mid to long-term sleep quality. Even if it's not about the absolute number of hours that you're using, it might be that you're able to control the hours, but the blue light from the devices or the psychological stimulation that you get from that time on the device can disrupt your circadian timing if you use it during the wrong times of the day. So what we're here today to talk about with our two specialists is what can we do as parents and educators working with families to help ourselves and the families we work with escape this cycle each year and develop long-term habits. First, we have Bharati Lakmandas, also known as Coach B. She's a positive psychology coach and a positive education facilitator based in Bangkok. She uses evidence-based approaches and positive psychology principles and intervention tools to work with teens and adults to facilitate constructive and sustainable changes that support improved mental and emotional well-being. Bharati's work in particular centers around topics like mindset shifts, mindful communication, building resilience, and developing emotional intelligence. Bharati herself was born and raised in Bangkok, and she worked in the research field before becoming certified as a coach in 2016. So now Bharati is an ICF PCC credentialed coach, an active member of the ICF Bangkok Charter chapter, and a founding member of the International Association of Positive Psychology Coaches. Also with us today is Lorraine Sin, who is a licensed mental health counselor in Hong Kong, specializing in developmental disabilities, trauma, and child psychology. Lorraine has extensive experience working with neurotypical and neurodiverse children, including those with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, ADHD, and other developmental disabilities. Lorraine is trained in play therapy, ABA therapy, ARC, and other evidence-based practices. Her background allows her to integrate therapeutic techniques that address both emotional and behavioral challenges in children. Currently, she also researches AI-driven critical thinking simulations and their impact on child development in collaboration with Stanford University and other international partners. Thank you both for taking the time. Let's dive in. I'd like to start with Bharati. What are some effective ways that parents communicate about screen time with kids before the problems start to arise, before they have to take the screen away?
I think that it's unrealistic to expect that screens will be eliminated from our lives during the holidays. But I think one of the most important things, it's not about that elimination piece, it's more about being intentional and that mindful usage of screens. I think a lot of parents want to not have conversations because they are not easy conversations to have with children. But I think one of the most important things to set the stage to help parents manage their expectations and to help children manage their expectations is, well, how much are we going to use the screens? What screens are we going to use? How much time are we going to spend on them? What times of the day? Like, as you mentioned, screens before bedtime and the blue light and the effect that it has on the quality of sleep. It's very important to kind of set the stage, beginning with these family meetings. Sometimes even the parents have different rules about it. Get everyone who's involved there, talk about it openly, let the children express what they want as well, and take what they want into consideration as well. Gone are the days where it's the parents have the power, right? Now it's all about building that buy-in and that autonomy that the children have as well, right? I mean, we're raising our children like that. So listen to what they have to say, take into consideration, and kind of come to a middle ground of what the acceptable or the fair kind of rules are regarding that. So I think initially just begin with that conversation with them. I think it's also very useful for parents to manage their expectations and know that when they go to their children and they tell their children that, okay, well, screen time's over, it's not like the child is going to say, okay, thank you so much. I completely respect that. I think it's important for parents to be able to manage their expectations that there will be power struggles, there will be temper tantrums, there will be yelling and, resistance to that, and how they want to show up in those situations with emotional intelligence, with kind of knowing at the back of their mind that, there may be times that our children are not going to agree with us. So in that moment, how do I want to show up, right? What do I want to do to kind of hold that space for my children? So one of the tips that I use in my work is I always tell parents to kind of look at this very simple module of emotional intelligence where the parent would notice what they are feeling first. They might notice that frustration because they are triggered because their child is being resistant. Then name what they are feeling and have tools to navigate through that as well. What do I want to do when my child is being resistant? What do I want to do when my child is going into this temper tantrum, and hold the space for them? So if they go into it with certain tools of what they can do just by asking themselves, what can I do? What are my options at this point? What's best to do in this moment? Is this an exception moment for my child? And kind of have a few thoughts around that. I think it helps them to keep a check on themselves and not kind of join in the chaos that their children are going through.
Mm. One of the things that you said that we talked about at our prior discussion is it's moving away from this feeling that parents need to be getting screen time down to zero. Number one, it's moving away from the feeling that parents need to have a checklist of rules and binary rules that need to be enforced. This is maybe the most important point to start with for anyone at any stage of their journey. There's never going to be a list of rules that is exactly right for your family. There is research that says there's a healthy number of hours and types of contexts in which kids should be interacting with technology, but that's not to say that there are not, like you said, exceptions. Parents needing to see these screen time conversations as conversations. It's about actually opening the channel of communication and taking the child's voice into account. Both you and Lorraine had very helpful, specific examples of what does that conversation look like? Because I think many parents out there, they can hear a panel like this and they can say, how do those words come out of my mouth in a moment when things are highly strung? Or I've never seen language like that modeled for me because I'm very used to having a rule-based household. Lorraine, do you have any specific examples of language that are useful for parents to invite their children into these conversations that give the kid more agency?
I think what's important to consider here is definitely the child's developmental stage. It does definitely also depend on what the personality of the child is, but also what kind of conversation they're ready to have. Because a child who is a bit younger, so if you imagine approximately a child who's, let's say, like 8 and under, 7 and under, might have a more difficult time having a full-on conversation with you on why screen time limits are important in terms of neurodevelopment, in terms of how it affects your brain and your brain functions. That might be a little bit complex for them. And so the way you would speak to, say, a 9-year old to a 12-year old versus a 12 to 18 versus, say, like a 3 to 7 is very different. So what kind of tools you use would be very different. However, in general, I would say it's important to try to give the child some context on why you're doing this. often, I think Bharati is right. Gone are the days where we just say, I said this is this, and therefore you will do it. The children will have questions, they will have curiosities. And if they don't understand why, it'll be difficult for them to be okay with and feel in control of the ability to say, okay, I think and I know that this is enough for me. So to start that conversation, I would say having some kind of level of understanding, having some level of explaining what the context is. Why do we need to put a screen time limit? Do you want to put the focus on because you guys want to be able to have a good Christmas together where you guys are able to play a game, or you want to go out for movies, or you want a special family dinner? Is it putting focus on other activities, or is it explaining to them, I need you to not be on your computer or your phone 30 minutes before bedtime because I'm really worried that it'll make it very difficult to sleep. Some of the ways I might make it easier for kids to understand as well as modeling. Modeling in general is a great way of learning for kids of most developmental stages, simply to letting them know that what they're doing, you also need to do. So if they see you on your phone right before bedtime, then they'll say something, didn't you say that it's bad for your sleep, mom? So I think, so for kids who are a little bit older, I would definitely say explain a little bit. Even I think when I say that, I think some people think that means 14 and up, and I need to like explain the neuroscience behind blue light. But what I
Mm.
really mean is approximately even 9 years old, you can already start to explain to them in their own words why too much screen time might not be a good idea. So to a 12-year-old, you might say, I am concerned about blue light affecting sleep. And we can look at research articles together if you wanted
Yes.
to. But if you were talking to an 8-year-old, you would say that, well, doctors have told a lot of people, doctors have found out that blue light is sometimes the light that's behind the screen makes it hard for your brain to rest, and it makes it hard for your brain to slow down. And then it makes it so that it's hard to sleep, or maybe it gives you more nightmares and gives you more dreams. So using the language that they're able to access is so important. One other thing I would say is, like Bharati said, the conversation is to be had before the screen time limit comes up. So it's important to give the kids the context, to give the adults and the kids should both have an understanding of what is to be expected on both ends. And it's important for both sides to stick to that plan that was made. So a lot of times I think parents will say, well, these conversations never go well. I end up saying something and the kids say no, and we don't manage to have a middle ground. Something I sometimes tell the kids once the context has been given, which usually will mitigate some of the emotion. What I usually tell to the parents and to the families is that sometimes I might even say, listen, it just sounds like the screen is too exciting for you right now. And maybe we're just not ready for this. And maybe we're just not ready to have agreed upon screen time. So maybe, like, what do you think? Do you think maybe we're not ready for screen time at all this winter holiday? It sounds as though we're saying the same sentence, and I would want everyone to notice. Seems like we're saying the same sentence as you can't do this, you can't have a screen. It's not the same sentence because this is something you're observing something and you're telling them this is why I'm concerned, but you still give the ball back to them. However, you have mentioned, therefore, maybe it's not such a good idea to have screen time then. So this is
Mm.
a much more collaborative way of saying it, and generally kids will be a little bit more open to a conversation like that. So that's one thing. And the last thing I would definitely mention is having the visual reminders for a lot of kids is helpful. So agreed upon plan, if you had it 3 weeks ago, they might not remember it today. They might not remember what kind of plan we said was okay today. And therefore, when you say, okay, we agreed upon 30 minutes of gaming after your homework and you have 10 minutes left, they might say something like, when did I agree to 30 minutes of gaming after homework only? I thought we could play more. So it's important to have the visual reminders, again, that is appropriate to their developmental level. So having the agreed upon plan, for example, printed out and on the fridge or put on the wall the moment that you agreed on it, putting it ASAP on the wall somewhere where the kid can see it at their eye level, even. Some people put it up really high and the kids can't even see it. Or even for younger children, having a visual timer. So something either like a timer in front of them on their phone. Better yet, if the screens do shut off after 5 minutes automatically, I think the act of physically taking the device away from the child will set off a fight, flight, freeze response for a lot of kids because it is a very much preferred activity. And so having a visual reminder reminding them it is now time for things to get shut off. Now it is time for us to put things away. Having either like a sand timer, like one of those ones that you flip upside down, or having a timer on your phone, or showing them, even they have those not analog clocks, the round clocks sometimes with a section that is colored in and then the time runs out. Something like that is very helpful for kids, especially under the age of 8. I think 3 to 8 is really important to have that visual reminder. And the last thing I would probably say along those reminders is basically when there is only 5 minutes left, it's important to not say, all right, that was it. That was all 30 minutes. And that was the only warning that you got. Because even if we imagine for ourselves, that's very difficult. If you're imagine yourself enjoying a TV show, and then someone says, oh, that was 30 minutes, and then shuts it off immediately. That's pretty upsetting. So that's something to remember, is that kids feel emotions really big. And so if you suddenly say, okay, that was time, and then you take that iPad away, they're really going to get really upset. So it's really important, even better yet, if the phone tells that, better yet, if the app tells them, but you could actually say, okay, the timer is about to go off in 5 minutes. So you have 5 more minutes. And then you can say the timer is going to go off in 3 minutes. Timer's going off in 2 minutes. And then at that point, really making sure there's a visual reminder and then letting them know, okay, that was it. That was it. And it's time to put our phones away. It might be difficult the first couple times, but I think oftentimes once that has become routine, once everything has been implemented, then it tends to go a lot smoother.
There are so many things that you said, Lorraine. I'll first talk about the lead up, that the cliff is coming. It doesn't have to be a scary cliff. We're preparing together for it. One of the things I have found very effective for toddler age is I actually acted like the timer, because that was the most fun for them. So they would come and they would boop me on the head, and it would be a tripartite agreement. It's a physical contract between us. Plus you get to hit mom on the head. They had to be gentle. I would make like a buzzing sound whenever they did that very small visual, physical reminder that we are having a family discussion. It's not so abstract for the little kids. They get to do something to commit to this action. Another thing that you reminded me of is reframing this screen time battle, zooming out instead and reframing it as, what does our day look like? What does the quality of your time look like during your conscious hours? This is something that doesn't just go for screen time during the holidays, but this is a technique that parents often employ successfully for during the entire year, which is, I'm not going to fight you about today's specific screen time. Instead, I want us to zoom out and have a discussion, especially if they're preteens or teens who are gaining more independence and choosing how to use their time. I want us to zoom out and have a discussion about, how does your body and your brain feel when you have a certain balance or proportion of different activities throughout your day? For example, I sat on a plane back from Singapore with a parent who has 2 teen daughters. I said, how do you handle not giving them phones for 2 teenage girls? You're saying you don't give them phones and the rest of their friends have phones. He said, it doesn't seem like it's a specific battle, because the lead up and the way that we have framed the conversation about technology with them has been that we have developed their interests in a lot of other things. They have hobbies, they have things that they like to do that are not on screens. And so when it does come to once a year, can I get a phone, which inevitably it does, we just say, if you don't get a phone, I'll buy you a boa constrictor because you're interested in becoming a vet. He said this year we bought our older daughter a snake because she wanted to raise a snake, and she actually did it. He showed me photos of the daughter with a pet boa constrictor in the house. My point is not that you have to buy your kids something to replace the phone, but my point is that he was tapping into, through his knowledge of that child's particular age and her interests and her personalized hobbies, he was drawing her attention gently to, is there something else that you could do with your time? But he's not actually entering the fight and knocking his head against the wall of, no, you absolutely must not have a phone. I think it would be great if we could unpack a little bit the type of emotional regulation when parents feel triggered. Right? When push comes to shove, your in-laws are in the house and you're trying to cook the turkey and the kids are running around. Some of the kids will not get off the PlayStation and you're just overwhelmed. What can parents do when they need to recenter themselves before going into a conversation about screen time?
Personally and professionally, I tell people to kind of just leave everything as it is and just come back to themselves and just center themselves and ground themselves first before they go into this war zone that they are expecting. So a couple of really easy breath work exercises that I do. One is called the 4-7-8 breathing. And what this does is that, and this is the principle behind this is to kind of trigger that vagus nerve that is part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so in doing that, what helps is to have longer exhales than inhales. So the 4-7-8 breathing would be inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, and then exhale for 8 counts. And this can be done in reps of 3 or reps of 5. Go find a quiet space and do this. Another one is the psychological sigh, which is take a deep inhale, and then on top of that inhale, you take a shorter inhale and then you release it out through the mouth. So you inhale through the nose, both your breaths, and then you release it through the mouth. And again, this is to trigger that vagus nerve, the longer exhale. What happens is that the tiny air sacs that we have in the lungs are filled with oxygen. So you're taking all that in, and through that long exhale, you are releasing the carbon dioxide. So those are two that work. Another breathwork technique that's really easy, if you don't remember count and you don't remember vagus nerve, is think of a box that has 4 equal sides, like a square box. So you start off maybe at the bottom of the box and you inhale for 4 seconds. So you go up the box one side for 4 seconds. You go across the box for 4 seconds and you hold. You exhale for 4 seconds and go down the box. And then you hold for 4 seconds and go to that starting point. So it's called box breathing, but it's really simple, rhythmic breathing that can kind of help you to just center yourself for a minute and all that chaos that you're feeling. So I think breathing is very important, and it's so simple. You know, you could do it, go find a quiet space outside of all of this and just kind of do that. So I would say start with the breathing just to center yourself and get your thoughts back into, you know, how you want to approach the situation.
The box breathing is a great option. And there, I think the word grounding is such an important word that Bharati brought up. In general, it's difficult to ground ourselves when we're feeling elevated, any kind of elevated emotion. And so a breathing exercise is a great way to get started with a grounding skill. Although sometimes some parents maybe are saying that I feel like I don't even have time to do that. I just need something that's super quick that is going to ground us. And you can actually focus on anything small. Sometimes you can focus on something you can see, just take a second and notice everything about it. It's taking a very small mindful moment. I think a lot of people think that mindful moments are only meditation, and that's not necessarily true. Sometimes you can even focus on something very small, like maybe you see a fridge magnet that is very far away. You can just take a second to notice what color it is. Can you think of anything else that is the same color? What is approximately the same size? It's all about taking a moment to ground yourself in your mind and in your space. Maybe something you can smell. One of the favorite things that I like to do is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can feel, or any of those is okay. I think when we're super overwhelmed, as long as the 5 senses are hit, I think you're good to go. So I think modeling grounding, I think, can be very helpful for your kids. Especially at times, since we're kind of on this topic where it's good to be collaborative with your kids. It's a really good option and a really good time for you to actually model the fact that it's okay to be overwhelmed for a second, and that you can actually find some ways to calm yourself down. So something that we practice in ARC, so ARC therapy is attachment regulation and competency. It basically comes into this idea of the connection between the child and the parent, and being able to co-regulate is a really big option, is a really big topic that you discuss in ARC. So being able to calm down with your child. One of the ways that you might be able to do that is maybe telling the child, modeling, saying, listen, I'm feeling very frustrated. I just need a minute to calm down. Maybe we can pause this conversation and I'll be back in 5 minutes when I feel a little bit more ready to talk. So that's a quick way of kind of removing yourself from a very heightened situation and just getting that time to calm yourself down, doing some quiet kind of grounding exercises, and then coming back to it. It's important that we do come back to it. I think some parents might say, well, what if I just like took a second to calm down and never came back? That will be very confusing for the child because you said you were going to come back in 5 minutes and then that might start another fight. So holding yourself to your words is also very important. And then something
Mm.
else that I would definitely think about, because I think for kids and then for parents as well, it's important having that visual, even if it's just inside of your mind, is very helpful. One of the exercises that I love to do with a child and the parent is what we call the anger thermometer. So the anger thermometer, if you imagine, is just kind of like a thermometer that's straight. And then at the very bottom, it's green, and then it goes to yellow, and then orange, and then red. So it kind of escalates in how angry you are. So it kind of signifies that when you're in the green, you're pretty much calm, good to go, you're content, you're ready to engage. When you're in the yellow, you're a little bit frustrated, you're getting a little annoyed. In orange, you're really definitely mad now. And in red, you're really infuriated and it's really difficult for you to do anything else other than be angry. So being able to put a small coping skill in each one of those levels, at least a couple of them, it can be very simple things. Things like maybe I feel like when I'm in the orange, I really need like a cold glass of ice water. That really helps me ground me in my body and calm down. It could be that when I feel I'm in the yellow part, in the yellow part of anger, maybe I need something quick, just something easy. Maybe I need like a stress ball or like something really small. Like I just need to take one deep breath and then I think I'm good to go. And then in the red as well, let's say if you're really, really angry, definitely that will indicate you need something that's pretty drastic. So maybe taking a longer break, being able to completely walk away from the situation. Sometimes, even especially for the kids, it can be taking their anger out on something else. So I think kids who have some tendency to revert to kind of aggression or like throwing things or kind of trying to hit people, that kind of thing, it's best if they are able to let that out in some other situation. So like you can go into your room and you can punch your pillow a couple of times. You can go into your room and you can find something soft to throw. Actually, one of my favorite things was giving my clients, I call them my kids, but they're my clients, giving my clients actually a pom pom. Have you ever seen those like little colorful pom poms? They have bigger ones that are really, really light. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell them you can throw it as hard as you can. And you can see as how far you can throw that pom pom. And you might
Mm-hmm.
imagine it's pretty hard to throw a pom pom because it's so light. So you give them a big pom pom and they try to throw it as hard as they can. And then I tell them, do you think you can get it even farther the next time? And it's just funny to them because they're kind of so angry and they're trying to throw this pom pom and they're throwing it with so much energy and with such gusto and it lands a couple centimeters away from them. So it kind of takes them away from them. It kind of helps them calm down. I think it's all about finding the coping skills that work for you and your family, the coping skills that works for the adult, the coping skill that works for the children, something they're able to engage with on their own. So the best, you should always have a coping skill that is on their own. So you don't want to have all five of the coping skills as run to mother, because that will just get you very overwhelmed very quickly. So some coping skills that you're able to do on your own, and then putting that again somewhere where the kids can see so they can have a quick visual reminder.
I'd like to maybe recap a little bit some of the fantastic practical advice that you guys have given today. Number one big takeaway from today's session is get ahead by setting family agreements early on. Frame them as agreements, as family meetings, as discussions where you co-create with the kid. And after that, make sure that whenever you are following through on that agreement, you're giving reasons. It's so interesting to me that this is something that we're pulling out because it seems a given that whenever as adults we say something, we tend to have reasons we say it. But sometimes when adults talk to kids, we think that it's because I said so. You can start to introduce logic or simply respect for them as individuals quite early on, probably earlier on than most parents think. You can start to give developmentally appropriate reasons for why you are doing something. Something very simple as a practice is when you say something that's a directive or seems to come across as a directive, simply say, because blank. And the because blank should not be because I said so. It should be because somebody said that this is not very healthy for us, or because I want to spend more time together, or because we've had enough screen time for the past 7 days and now it's time to change something. Whatever it is, make sure that the second part of the sentence has a reason. Another thing that came out of today is holding yourself accountable. role modeling, being able to role model not just good screen time, but role modeling our ability to center ourselves, our ability to be aware, even just showing our kids that we have a sense of our internal flux emotionally is already a huge step forward. Another big takeaway on a practical level is setting visual reminders and timers as much as you can to accompany the agreements specifically for younger kids. We're definitely going to want to think, what is a fun way that I can represent timers or that I can prepare my kids to slowly transition off of the screen? Last thing I'd like to pull out from today's conversation is being able to identify what works for you when it comes to recentering yourself. Different people have different techniques for this, and we've heard many different types of physiological techniques that we can use, but you need to find what works for you. Oftentimes it has to do with breathing, being aware of your body state before you try and put words to it, and saying that it's okay to take a break. The main thought is it's okay to take a break. You don't have to go straight into battle, and maybe taking the break will help you to reframe whether you think it's a battle or not. Maybe it can become more of a conversation with the kid or with your spouse. Maybe if I can slip one in there for Lorraine particularly, because you do have so much experience with neurodiverse kids, if there are any tips that you can share for families who may have neurodiverse needs.
For kids though, who are neurodiverse, I think it becomes even more important. The visual timer is often one of the best ways to make sure that they're aware of this. Another way that I work with my kids who are neurodiverse, and all kinds of kids actually, is trying to use some kind of story-based way of learning it. A lot of people might be aware of Bluey, the TV show. It's very popular these days. There's actually an episode of Bluey. The younger child, Bingo, essentially brings home this stuffed animal, and the whole class gets a week to have the stuffed animal brought back with them. They kind of have their weekend and they realize it was all with screens and they don't like how the photos turned out. So then they try to go do something more fun that's outside, spend some quality time together with Bob Bilby, which is the name of the stuffed animal. And then they end up having a good time outside. Just one example, obviously, Bluey is in general, I would say, for supposedly for 8 and unders, but I will say there are some teens that I have seen who definitely love watching Bluey. But using that as an example, or even having any kind of other story or like a secondhand, so that way you can see it kind of from the outside. Kids don't feel so attacked when they're being directly confronted about something like this. So a story-based way of learning is a great way to do that. Story-based ways of learning about anger management, using scenes in movies as a way to bring up the topic, not even just about screen time, but just like managing escalated emotions, managing anger can be a great option. Keeping the visual timers for sure. And I think everybody just trying to be emotionally aware and having a simple path of explanation from one step to another. When I feel angry, how angry am I? When I'm this angry, what do I do to help myself feel better? So like having a very simple 1, 2, 3 way of doing it can be helpful too. So for example, when I'm feeling angry, I can identify that in the anger thermometer, I am at a yellow level right now. So I'm actually pretty okay. What is a coping skill that feels okay for me right now that is at the yellow level? I remember I can go get my squeeze ball. I'm gonna go get my squeeze ball, take a couple deep breaths while I do that, and then I can engage in the conversation. So having a very simple step-by-step way of handling emotion can be helpful.
Thank you.
I'm a parent as well. I have an 8-year-old and an almost 17-year-old. And I think sometimes in my mind, I feel like the conversation is going to be so heavy and so like, oh, I really don't want to have it. I think that it doesn't need to be a very formal kind of discussion. I think that these conversations are nice when they're had in a more light sort of way, in a more casual kind of way, like, hey, let's sit down, let's discuss where we're going with screen time over the holiday or anything else for that matter. Don't already imagine that it's going to be heavy and it's going to be frustrating and the kids are going to push back and all of that. Open up the conversation. If you feel like this is not the right time for it, be very open, own it, and say, hey, look, I don't think we're getting anywhere with this. Let's go think about what we want, think about what you would like to have, and then we'll kind of all put it together tomorrow or day after and give them a specific kind of time. Just go into it with a bit of lightness, maybe a little bit of humor, and don't be so rigid about it, I would say.
I love both of
Yeah.
those pieces of advice that you guys are giving. I think of it as almost like take it easier than you think yourself as a learner. Allow yourself that grace. You're not just holding yourself to this rigid standard of, I need to get them off the screen. It has to end in them getting off the screen. If you open that up a little bit more and say, oh, I'm going to choose my battles, especially depending on the age of the child, that can be very effective. We'll end on that note. That's the big takeaway for today is be optimistic about screen time during the holidays. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. We did convene this panel to be able to help parents address what is an annual period of dread around holidays. The takeaway from today that I'm getting from both of you is have a good holiday and don't worry too much. Don't worry about trying to get it right. It's about having the conversation with your family and your loved ones and trying to find what works for you, and then being aligned with visual reminders and co-creating as you go along. If you start from a place of co-creation, you start from a place that we're having a family discussion about this. There's reasons that we're having this discussion. These are the qualities of the time that we want to spend together or alone during the holidays. And then we're going to put it into a document or a visual, and we're going to have certain practices that we all agree to. If you do that 2 weeks before school lets out, that probably is going to put you in a much better place. Maybe it's not going to solve everything. It's going to put you in a much better place come the 21st of December. I want to thank both of you for taking the time today.
You're right. Compassionate collaboration is definitely what I'm taking away from this conversation here.